We have a question here from Herco Willinga, I think that's how you pronounce it, from Lisburn. And her question is, I would like to know Mr Wilson's opinion on the publishing of local politicians' expenses claims from MLAs to councillors.
Well, I think that first of all, as far as MPs are concerned, the expenses will be published from, I think, the middle of this month. Though a lot of them have already been published. I have no difficulty with it. I mean, if people are claiming expenses, then there should be transparency there. What I do have difficulty with is where that is then used in a way where it is simply an attempt to stir up a sensational story. And I've already become the victim of that to a certain extent. I'll tell you a story about it in a moment or two. But you know, I think that journalists must also use it in a responsible way. I mean, I look at, first of all, I don't excuse an awful lot of the practices that went on. This flipping of second homes to escape tax or to gain money to do repairs to a house or whatever, or moving from one house to another, and or increasing, as David Cameron has done, the size of your mortgage, you know, paying off one mortgage, increasing the size of the other mortgage so you can claim the maximum from the public purse. I mean, I really don't think that that's justifiable. I actually share an apartment in London, and that keeps my expenses down to about half of what the maximum claim should be. But there was a query, and this just shows how this has been twisted by journalists who are always looking for a story on it. There was a query on my expenses about curtains that were bought for the apartment, and immediately they jumped on it and said, see, he spent far too much on curtains, because the query had been, why did I purchase curtains? And I actually purchased them in Larne. Now, when the explanation came out that the query was not about the amount of, in fact, the House of Commons made it quite clear they would have paid the full amount, but it was about where I bought them. And the explanation that I gave was, well, when I priced them in London, they were going to cost me between 14 and 1,600 quid. Now, I don't know a great deal about curtains, but I know that you can get them in Harry Corey's for a bit cheaper than that. Are you allowed advertising this programme, by the way? When I investigated, I found that I could actually get them made back home here for about, I think it was £500 or £600, and they were purchased here. The House of Commons then made a query. Why did you purchase them in Larne? I suppose I thought they were from a house in Larne, to be quite truthful. And I explained, there was the quote, I could get them cheaper back home, and I bought them in Larne, took them over to London and hung them. And saved the House of Commons nearly £1,000. Now, they pointed out that they were paid the full amount, but they really were just querying where they were bought. Now, when that explanation was given to the journalist, he wasn't interested in the explanation that actually this was done to save money. He was only interested in, you know, there was a query about the curtains that had been bought. And that's where I think some of this expenses thing has been hyped up. Where there's not a story, people have tried to make a story. But of course, where there have been things which are inexcusable, then of course people should be punished for it.
Sort of similar question here. You've touched on it already anyway, Sammy, but David Fraser from Belfast, his question is are you willing to give a detailed breakdown of your expenses and allowances in any of your capacities, including any capital gains made from any money you have paid back at a later date?
Well, I've been dead unlucky, because when we purchased the apartment in London, it was at the top of the market, so I probably have lost about 50,000 quid on it. So I don't know, but I'm sure I've lost an awful lot of money on it, so there's no, I've never made any capital gain on property. But what we have said, and I mean as a party, we have made this clear in our proposals to the Commissioner now looking at it, that there should not any capital gain on property which has been funded at taxpayers' expense through MPs' expenses should be paid back, and it shouldn't actually stay with the person. You know, we bought because it was cheaper than renting and it was cheaper than staying in a hotel. But I think that it would be unfair, since the interest is being paid solely by through tax or through the public purse. I think it'd be wrong to, for the capital gain, if there is any capital gain, to be kept. So I have no difficulty with that at all, and indeed that is part of our party's proposals to the Commission looking at this.
We've included a second question from Mr. Fraser, and he says, do you think it is possible to operate fully as an MLA or indeed a Stormont Minister and hold any other elected position at the same time, for instance as a councillor, MP or MEP, or is this a disservice to the electorate and simply a way to concentrate power in the hands of a few people regardless of what party they stand for?
Well, first of all, I do it, so I think it is possible, and I hope, and election results would seem to indicate that people make a judgment that I do a reasonable job there. It doesn't give you too much free time, but that's my choice. I mean, if I want to work all day and night, that's up to me. At some stage in my life I may decide, look, I want to slow down a wee bit, or I want to have more time to myself or whatever, but that's a personal decision that I make. And I think that as far as whether or not someone is capable of doing those jobs and doing them to the satisfaction of the electorate is the electorate's responsibility to make a judgment on. And I've absolutely no doubt if people thought that I wasn't able to carry out those tasks and give the kind of service which they expect, then they will indicate that at the ballot box. I could just make something clear that although you do all of those jobs, you don't get a separate salary for all of those jobs, because there is, with the Assembly members only get a third or a quarter of what they're entitled to if they've got another publicly held post. And given that there's a fair amount of overlap, I mean, a lot of my constituency work, people come to see me. They don't really come to see me as an MLA or an MP. They come to see me as a public representative, and they really don't worry which capacity they're seeing me in there. So most of my constituency work would be an overlap, and I wouldn't get more constituency work because I'm an MLA and an MP. They tend to come because I'm a public representative for East Antrim, and where there is that degree of overlap, then you shouldn't get paid twice for the job.
Well, our next question, Paul Atherton from Belfast actually touches on that, and he appreciates that you don't get the full salary for each of your political posts, but he's asking what your total salary is for the combined posts.
Haven't a clue. My accountant could probably tell you, but I'm sure actually, since it's all in the public domain, somebody could, it wouldn't take too hard to get it. But all I would say is that I taught for about 25 years. I was head of department. When actually I stopped being head of department and became an MLA, it was actually a reduction in salary at that stage. But probably as an MP I got paid more than what I got paid had I stayed on as head teacher in school.